Do you think that people that have more money make better decisions or worse decisions?
I think they have a lot more margin for error, so they can take a lot more risk taking.
If you have no money, a lottery ticket is like your way out. And if you have money, investing is sort of like the self-sustaining path.
And so a lot of people's central principle in life is to be liked. And if you want to do different things and you want to do better things, I think that you have to organize your life around what you want and what you think is best. And that doesn't mean hurting other people,
but it means not optimizing around the central variable of being agreeable or being likable.
How do I avoid bad decisions? But how do I avoid circumstances dictating what my options are? And if you think about decision-making that way, then
going backwards, it's like, how do I avoid being forced? But going forwards is like, how do I position myself for the most options possible?
Is emotion good for decision-making?
Well, emotion can help you, but it can also hurt you. So if emotion is causing you to not think or not pay attention or not respond accordingly, then you have a problem. And if it's not, then it can be a good thing.
The question to ask yourself is it helping me or hurting me?
What's more important in today's time? Is it
clear thinking or first mover advantage?
Este episodio es presentado por Wealth Mastery, el programa inmersivo donde descubrirás los secretos de las personas más ricas del mundo y comprenderás el juego de la riqueza.
Bienvenido a la Revolución de la Riqueza, el podcast que convierte las ideas en libertad financiera. Si buscas herramientas para transformar tu vida y alcanzar la riqueza 360, este es tu espacio. Suscríbete, activa la campana y no te pierdas los próximos episodios.
Well, thanks so much, Shane. It's a pleasure to have you in Wealth Revolution.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's amazing to be here sitting with you. I'm a big fan of yours. And let's get right into it because we're in a short span, but let's talk about Naval Ravikant. We were just discussing this topic. It was the first time I heard Naval was with you. How did you meet him?
Well, so interestingly enough, we were texting and he came on the podcast. And right after the podcast, we recorded the podcast and we've had, I think, 30 million downloads on this podcast at this point, this episode. And so this one episode. And anyway, after the podcast, I was like, I don't think I'm going to do podcasts anymore. And he's like, why not? He's like, that was a great conversation. And I was like, we can't get the sound right. Like, it's annoying. We were releasing one every 3 months. And then he texted me like a few hours later and he's like, I guarantee you that's not going to be the last podcast you do. And it wasn't. And we've only recorded one, but he became a bit of a friend. And super fortunate I kept going after that because that one really blew up. And that really kept me going at a time when nobody was listening to podcasts.
What's your biggest learning from Naval?
Just to be conscious about living. And, I think one thing I admire about him is that he doesn't optimize his life based on what other people think. And so a lot of people's central principle in life is to be liked. And so they do things to be liked. They want to be agreeable. They don't want to offend people. They don't want to, and there's a point where that helps you and there's a point where it hurts you. And if you want to do different things and you want to do better things, I think that you have to organize your life around what you want and what you think is best. And that doesn't mean hurting other people, but it means not optimizing around the central variable of being agreeable or being likable. And I think too many people just take that as their focus.
And how can you beat that? Because it seems like clear thinking is the way. Obviously, you have a book that's all about clear thinking, but we're social animals. We like to be liked.
Well, I think there's liking to be liked, but there's also finding your tribe. Like it used to be that if we got kicked out of the tribe, it meant certain death. We had one tribe, so we had to get along with everybody in that tribe. And now you can find a lot of different tribes online. Like we have access to people we've never had access to before. And so I think you have to consciously think about what outcomes do I want? What's going to optimize or sort of increase the probability I get those outcomes? And how do I go about doing that in a way that's true to me? And it's actually helped me not take offense to people who are, a lot of people seem to be disagreeable, but they have valid points. And a lot of people stop listening to them. And now when I see somebody who's disagreeable and they have valid points, it's much easier for me to listen to the points that they're saying and ignore the disagreeableness, because I find too often we spend too much time like couching our feedback in a way to be and we're not communicating clearly. So I have a lot more respect for people who are willing to put themselves out there, willing to do things, willing to try, willing to fail, the man in the arena, if you will, going back to that, where it's so easy to lob grenades from the sideline at people who are actually doing things. But I have a lot of respect for people that are doing them, even if they're not doing them in a way that I myself would do them.
And is there like a hack or something? Because obviously this is a bias, right? People like to be agreeable just because that's the way it has always been. Is there a way that you think people can hack being agreeable or just practice, I guess, being disagreeable?
Well, I think it's sort of thinking about what is the central organizing principle of your life and what is it you want to accomplish. And I think everything stems from that. There are sort of like shortcuts you can do to get out of this mindset. And your rule could be that you could make an automatic rule. And the rule could be, I always speak the truth, even if that's not pleasant for me and not pleasant for other people. And then that would help you sort of get around that. And you can tell other people, you could preface your comment with, look, I want to be honest with you. I don't know how to say this in the best way, and I don't want to hurt your feelings, but there's this difficult thing that I want to say, and then that's a good way to bring it up. And that doesn't mean the other person's going to like it, but now you're being true to yourself and you're saying the thing that you really want to say and you're communicating clearly. And the other person might not want to hear it, but you don't control the other person. You only control yourself. And I think that taking that agency is a good first step.
Great. Another of my personal heroes is Charlie Munger. You had the opportunity to spend some time with him. What did you learn? What was the biggest learning from him?
I think the biggest learning I had from him, well, twofold. One, is that if you want your kids to grow up and live a certain way, that's the way that they should live with you. So here he was, one of the world's richest people. He's living in this house from the 1960s. And I talked to him about where kids go wrong and like where parents go wrong, where wealthy parents go wrong with their kids. And he said they try to force artificial restraints on their kids. So if you hypothetically had a billionaire and they were telling their 15-year-olds to go get a job at McDonald's while they're being chauffeured to work, that's only going to lead to resentment. I thought that was a really interesting insight. And the other thing I learned from him, which I was sort of just talking about at the event here, is that I asked him one of the most underappreciated aspects of Berkshire Hathaway and their success. And he mentioned that they were never, well, with very few exceptions, they were never really forced into bad decisions. And I thought that was a really powerful way to come up with good decisions. It's almost inversion, if you will, where it's like, how do I avoid bad decisions? But how do I avoid circumstances dictating what my options are? And if you think about decision making that way, then going backwards, it's like, how do I avoid being forced? But going forwards is like, how do I position myself for the most options possible? So instead of trying to predict the future and being right, I position myself for multiple possible futures and I quickly adapt to whatever is playing out or happening.
Great. I mean, that sounds like a great idea. Just avoid the bad decisions. Talking about mental models, it's something that also Charlie inspired a lot of people, I guess, also you. I mean, and you've talked and discussed that topic in advance. For you, what's like the most valuable mental model if you could like narrow things down to just one?
I really like second order thinking, which is, and then what? And I use that question with my kids all the time. It's like, I want to do this, and then what? Like, what is the goal you're trying to achieve? Is that actually going to move you forward? Is it first step positive, second step negative? Or is it first step negative, second step positive? Those are the decisions that really get people. So I don't know about you, but I hate going to the gym. I go every day, but I hate it. Some people run on that treadmill and they look happy. I'm like, I don't know what these people had for breakfast, but like, I want some of that. And for me, it's pain, but it's first order pain, second order positive. And so thinking through things that way just helps you sort of see what happens after I do this. So I work out. Oh, well, now I'm healthier. I might live longer. I'm going to better show up with my energy during the day. Okay, well, that's a benefit that I want. But if I do something negative, like, oh, I got a craving. I really want a chocolate bar right now. Well, so first order positive, I have the sugar sort of spike and I feel this energy, but now second order negative. So it's going to make me tired all afternoon, which means I'm not going to pay attention to my meetings. I'm not going to be switched on. I'm not going to be the person that I want to show up as. And that's a very simple example, but it sort of walks you through a different way of thinking about it. With my kids, they would always be like, I want to do this or I want to do that. And I'd be like, okay, and then what? Like, you have to visually imagine I've done this thing and now what position am I in?
How can you incentivize your kids to implement these mental models or just drive them through like good decision making?
If you figure that out, let me know. I think the best way is to actually just let them make their own decisions. And so the path that I've always taken with the kids is you're involved in the decision-making process, and they have been since they were 4. And their involvement looks different. So when they're 4, I would be like, you have a 10% input into this decision. As they get older, I'm like, you have 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, even 90% input into this decision. You have 100%. Now they have 100%. It's like, this is your decision. Now let's talk about that. Do you want me to make that decision or do you want to make that decision? And if you want to make it, do you want to talk through it with me or do you want to make it on your own? And obviously you don't let them do that with sort of like one-way doors where they can't come back, but you really want them to actually make mistakes and learn from them and talk about them. And you can't have that attitude as a parent where it's like, I told you so, or if you only asked me, like that doesn't engender learning with the kids at all. You really want them to exercise their judgment and make mistakes. And, one of my kids is getting braces. And I was like, okay, like you need braces. Do you want to get them before the end of school or after the end of school? And so you need the braces. And do you want me to make this decision or do you want to make it? And he said, I want to make it. And he picked something completely different than I would have picked. But he has to live with that. And so that's his decision.
Great. Now let's change topics to money and wealth. So what's the biggest misconception that people usually have around money?
That I have a lot of it.
Okay. Really? That's the answer.
I think with wealth, I define wealth as more than money. And I think most people define wealth as money, but eventually you get to a point where you would trade all of your money for physical fitness, for a good relationship with your kids, with your partner. You would trade it for all these things that are not money. And I think that with wealth, I think about it as including time, freedom, health, community, kids, family, and of course money, because money enables some of this stuff. But money enables it to that point. And I think if we just think about wealth as money, we end up doing things that we get to a destination that we never wanted to get to, and we haven't thought about it. And I think, for me, money is a way to create time. It's a way to enable physical fitness. It's a way to enable all these other things that I want to do or be a part of. And it's a tool towards that. It's not an end of itself.
I agree completely on that matter. What has been your best investment, I guess, in a more philosophical matter?
What do you mean?
Like in a broader sense, things that you have invested in that are not around money. Maybe it's knowledge, maybe it's friendships.
Time with my kids is the one thing that I've always told myself I can be ambitious later, and I can't get back time with my kids later. And I think the study is like you've spent 80% of your time with your kids by the time they're 12. And I wanted to make that count to the extent possible. And it doesn't mean I was every day it worked out the way that I wanted it to, but it was definitely a priority. But that meant saying no to speaking. It meant saying no to doing more things. It meant saying no to a lot more money. But I think it's something that was a good choice for me to make at the time. And I think we just have to be conscious about those choices. And what do we really want in life? Going back to sort of like, what is it you want? And then how do you get what you want?
Do you think that people that have more money make better decisions or worse decisions?
I think they have a lot more margin for error, so they can take a lot more risk taking. And so I think that a lot of people, if you have no money, a lottery ticket is like your way out. And if you have money, investing is sort of like the self-sustaining path. But I know a lot of incredibly wealthy people, and I can say that our conversations are just normal people conversations. They have the same issues with money that most people have. And I'm not talking about extreme like 10 billion plus, but I'm saying like 20 million to sort of a billion. They have the exact same problems that everybody else has with money. They're thinking about it. It's conscious in their brain, drives them, it motivates them. It's part of the reason they've been successful, but they still struggle. A lot of it's illiquid. I think there's an optimal level of wealth, and it's probably, between 15 and 60 million.
Okay.
Adjusted for inflation.
Quiero recordarte que este episodio es presentado por Wealth Mastery, el evento diseñado para potenciar tu vida financiera y personal. Durante 3 días aprenderás sobre inversiones, salud mental y bienestar físico. No pierdas la oportunidad de vivir esta experiencia. Visite el link que dejamos en la descripción.
What's the most overrated idea from Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett?
That what they do is simple. I don't think it's simple at all. I mean, one of the best ideas is take a simple idea and take it seriously, but they make it look so easy and so effortless. And I think people just walk away from listening to them going, I can do that too. But they built that knowledge up through first principles. So you're consuming their abstractions, their compressions of knowledge, but they've built that knowledge through experience. Whereas I think we just get the sound bites and we don't build it up through experience. So we don't actually embody it the same way that they do. And I think that's pretty misconceived on their part.
What's more important in today's time? Is it clear thinking or first mover advantage?
Well, I think clear thinking is enduring, but first mover advantage would depend on what it is. Is it winner take all market and I move first? But that is a bit of clear thinking when you think about it. So I think thinking is a tool that will be more valuable in the future than it is now, as a lot of people start outsourcing their thinking to AI. One of the interesting areas where we can add value is going to be knowing when to opt out of AI. So AI is going to be right 99.5% of the time. And how do we develop the ability to recognize that 0.5% where it doesn't align with our goals or our vision, or it didn't think through the problem in the way that is true to us or our situation or our circumstances. But I think from a purely rational point of view, AI is going to be pretty good at making decisions. It already is.
And on that topic, how can we use AI to enhance our thinking?
Well, one of the ways that you can use it is just have a conversation with it. So if you think of decision-making, the biggest problem with decision-making, the source of all problems, is basically blind spots. There's something you didn't know about the future. And if you think about decision-making that way, then AI can become a tool to reveal blind spots to you. And people try to do this. Sometimes when they give you a comment or they argue with you or they give you a different point of view, they're giving you a different perspective into the situation. And that makes a lot of sense, but we don't often hear it. But we'll hear it from AI because I don't have the baggage with ChatGPT that I might with you. You know, at work, we're rivals. We're in competition. I might not like you. ChatGPT is this sort of like neutral thing. So it can say the same thing as you, and I'm going to hear it much different than if I heard it from you. And so I think we can use AI in that way. And going back to the blind spots for a sec, one way to conceptualize this is imagine that, you know, there's 5 of us in the room here. We're all playing poker and I'm looking at everybody's hands. Well, I have no blind spots. How often am I going to play my hand poorly? Never. I'm never going to play it poorly. I might not win, but I'm not going to play it incorrectly because I see everybody's information. And in the world, our goal is basically we're at a poker table. There's an indefinite, you know, there's 10 players or whatever. And your job is like, can I see one more player's hand? And if I can see one more, can I see 2? Can I see 3? And the way to visualize that is sort of walking around a decision in a 3-dimensional way or using AI to talk through a decision as a sounding board. You can put the chat on auto delete. But it can also act as people for you. You can say, hey, you know, I'm coming to you. You are Charlie Munger, and I want you to act like Charlie Munger, talk like Charlie Munger, think like Charlie Munger. And I'm going to explain my problem to you, and you're going to ask me questions about my problem, and then you're going to give me advice or walk me through my thinking and make sure that I haven't missed anything. And so it becomes this really helpful partner. But at the end of the day, what is it doing is it's removing our blind spots.
Yeah. But then in a world where we can ask Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, and all the geniuses, Albert Einstein of history, what will be the role of humans in decision making?
I think it's, you know, in the short term, we're still in charge. In the medium term, it's going to be knowing when to opt out. And I can't really predict anything beyond that. In the medium term, it's going to be AI has recommended XYZ, and then you're deciding is that the action or not. It's sort of like airplanes today. Autopilot is more safer than human pilots, but we feel more comfortable having that. And I think there's a phase where we're going in now where we're sort of more comfortable having a human but AI's recommendation is going to be 99.9% of the time, you know, the right path. We're not there yet, but by the end of next year, we will almost certainly be there. And then your job is going to be, oh, I don't like that, or that does this, and it can't foresee that consequence. And so you're still going to have an active role in decisions for a while. And I think that'll be the human niche, the human role.
What's your view, I guess, around intuition in all of this?
I'm a big fan of intuition, but if you think of intuition, if you go back to Daniel Kahneman, who studied intuition for a living, he basically said you need repeated reps, a lot of reps, rapid feedback, and the same environment. So the same environment, a lot of reps, and rapid feedback. And if you think about the world we live in today, none of those things are true. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't hone your judgment or pattern matching of intuition, but you're not living in this world where those things are true. So your job is to, how do I check my intuition? How do I spend my time? So I have an intuition, I have a pattern match, I have a hunch, and now I want to spend my time verifying that. And if you look at the world's top chess players, they play a game which there is pattern recognition, there is rapid feedback, there's a lot of reps, and it's very clear. So they can develop intuition. So when you watch like a master chess player playing, why do they take so long to make a move? And if you talk to Magnus Carlsen or anybody at that level, they say, I instantly know my move. I've probably known it 3 moves ago, but now I'm verifying that's the right move. I have an intuition around what that move is, but now I'm going to verify, is that true or not? And I think we want to maintain that intuition because that's a very human thing. And we all have intuition that, you know, AI, at least in the foreseeable future, won't recognize. We can tell when somebody's walking towards us and they're intimidating or they're scary or they're threatening, and we can't explain it, but we have an intuition around it. And I think that there's areas where we can have that and areas where we want to double check it. I think decision-making in the workplace, financial decisions, we want to double check it. But relationships, I think we should actually be a bit more intuitive and we should have more emotional component to it. We shouldn't be purely rational. You can think of everything as a continuum between rational and emotional. And if you think of it that way, your question is, where do I want to be? Where's the ideal place in that spectrum to be on the decision-making ladder? And if the ideal place, if it's a financial decision, I definitely want to be more rational than emotional. But if it's a relationship decision or maybe a date night decision, I want to be more emotional and then rational. And I think we have a lot of leeway, but we never want to be at either extreme.
Is emotion good for decision making? I remember Naval saying that if he could give some advice to himself like 10, 20, 30 years ago, it would be to be less emotional. Do you think it makes sense in any context?
Well, emotion can help you, but it can also hurt you. So we have a default in the book called emotion, which is one of the situations that we tend not to think. So if emotion is causing you to not think or not pay attention or not respond accordingly, then you have a problem. And if it's not, then it can be a good thing. We all want to rally behind the emotional leader in a time of crisis. We all have it. We're naturally drawn to somebody who's confident, whose sheer force of will, whose emotions bring us together. So it can help you and it can hurt you. The question to ask yourself is it helping me or hurting me? And I don't think Naval, if you talk to him, I don't think he'd want to be purely emotionless. I think people who are just unhappy, and studies, I think, verify that.
What has been like the biggest blind spot that you've seen in the hundreds of leaders that you interviewed and got to meet? What has been like the biggest blind spot that you see?
I don't know if it's a blind spot, but there's this belief in themselves that isn't warranted by the evidence. And I think that is, especially with up and coming people, you can tell, a lot of them are going to be successful and they believe in themselves when nobody else does. And I don't know if that's a blind spot because it tends to work out really well, but I only see the successful cases. I never see all the belief in myself and it doesn't work out. But I would say that's sort of a blind spot in a way, but it can work for you. So not all blind spots are bad, I guess.
And your biggest blind spot that you failed to catch on for the longest period of time?
I think I was a little slow to AI when it first came out and sort of ignored it. And now I'm all in. I'm like the opposite. Like I sort of course corrected there. But I ignored it until my kids started playing with it a lot. And then I just didn't think it was that useful for a lot of the reasons that many people think it's not useful today. And, when it first came out, people are like, it's hallucinating. It's not very helpful. It's like a toy. And that's how a lot of innovations really start. And that was a big blind spot for me.
And has overthinking got you in trouble? Like, have you missed any opportunities for overthinking the stuff?
Well, I have a concept called stop, flop, or no. And so at the point, you should decide as soon as possible or as late as possible. But how do you determine as late as possible? And the answer is stop, flop, or no. So you stop gathering useful information. Flop is first lost opportunity. So you're about to lose an opportunity because you haven't decided. Now you have to decide, or you know what to do. But I think that helps people get out of analysis paralysis. So flop is an actual decision point. The decision point can be I do nothing, but that is a decision point. And doing nothing is a decision in that moment. Whereas I tend to default, like if it's an investment opportunity and it's just sitting there and I don't have to decide, well, why would I decide today? There's no advantage. I'm going to gather more information up until the point at the very last minute when I have to make that decision. Something can change in the market. Interest rates can change. I can find a better opportunity. So I don't want to make that decision the minute it's presented to me. I sort of want to wait, gather as much information about the situation and how I feel about it. And then I want to make that decision at the very last moment.
Worst advice you ever received?
Do what you love, I think is like, yeah, because I think that just leads you, if what you love is not valuable to society, that's not going to lead you to a very productive or healthy life. And I think that you need to find something that you can do 10,000 times without getting bored instead of what you love. And I think that's a better way to phrase things. What can I do 10,000 times? Because I'm going to get better at it every time I do it. That's going to pay me, that other people are going to pay me for, that's valuable to society. And it doesn't have to be immediate payment. It can be payment in the future. But how do I do that? And what does that look like? And maybe that's podcasting. Maybe it's starting a newsletter. maybe it's writing articles, maybe it's doing whatever it is, but what can I do that many times without getting bored? And I think there's a big advantage to that. And that kind of, you start to love things as you get better at them too. So if you can find that thing where you might not love it to start with, you might end up loving it, but you're also going to get a lot of reward from doing it along the way.
Shane, you have been a great inspiration for myself. I've heard you since long time ago, and now I have my own podcast and you're on the other side. What has been your secret sauce? Anything that you can share to the content creators that are in Latin America and all the audience in general?
I think for me, I never thought to create one of the most popular podcasts in the world. What I wanted to do is create a podcast that I wanted to listen to. And I wanted to have conversations that I wanted to do. And so I think where people lose their way is they start doing things to gain an audience instead of doing things that are true to themselves. And if I could suggest anything, that's how you lose your audience in the long term. You grow really quickly, but audiences are fickle. And if you just give them what they want over and over again, it looks good in the short term, first order positive. Second order, it's really negative. You get bored of it, for one, and two, they just get tired of it. It's the same content over and over. And so I think that there's a big advantage to just doing what you love. All the conversations that I have with guests are all guests that I want to talk to. And this is a conversation I would have with them, even if we weren't recording this. And I ask those questions. I don't look at it the other way, which is also equally valuable and maybe better for growing an audience. But, the alternative is like, do a lot of research on Google. What are the trending topics? What can I get this person to talk about that's controversial? Because I know that's going to drive views. It's going to drive clicks and working backwards. I just want to create cool stuff that I'm proud of, that I think my kids are proud of, and that I learn from myself.
What has been the trick? Last question, but what has been the trick to get Charlie Munger and all of these amazing people to meet you and to discuss all of these topics and to have them, most of them, in the other chair for interviews?
I don't know if there's a trick, but it's quiet persistence. And so I see no as not yet, and I follow up. And so few people actually follow through. And so following up means somebody said no, but 3 months later, I use Superhuman for email, and I just set a reminder, like remind me in 2 months, 3 months. When I follow up, is now the right time? Is it a better time? Has something changed? And I think, I eventually just wear people down sometimes. I'm always polite, and it always comes from me, never an assistant. It's never a form email. It's never that. It's a real human, a real connection. And it's, I want to capture people's wisdom and make it available to the world for free. And often they say no, they're busy people. I mean, I'm not going after people who have a lot of free time. But eventually most of them say yes. So
amazing. Well, thank you for sharing your knowledge. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Shane A. Parrish, and you can find the podcast. It's called The Knowledge Project.
And Farnam Street also, and Clear Thinking.
Yeah. Farnam Street, Clear Thinking. So if you Google Farnam Street, it's probably the first hit, fs.blog. And then my book is called Clear Thinking.
Well, Shane, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for being here in Wealth Revolution.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Look forward to listening.
Thank you.
Gracias por acompañarnos en otro episodio. Si te gustó, dale like, suscríbete y activa la campana para recibir notificaciones. Comparte este video con alguien que quiera transformar su vida. Recuerda que generar riqueza es chamba de todos. Este podcast es una producción de Sonoro.